Whoa, feedback.
Okay, this is the voiceover for the opener of the voiceover radio show. This is take one.
In a world where laughter was king.
No, in a world, buddy.
What do you mean, no, in a world?
It's a podcast.
Oh? Okay. In a land that...
No, in a land either.
In a time.
No, I don't think so.
In a land before time.
It's two guys talking about voiceovers.
When everything you know is wrong.
That's wrong.
A girl.
No.
Two girls.
Well, maybe Andrew, but come on.
Now,
No.
more than
Stop it.
a renegade cop.
A cop?
A robot renegade cop.
You're fired.
You're fired.
No, you're actually fired.
I'm fired.
Get out of the booth, Jack.
No, I like it in here.
There's no take two. There's no just a little more purple. Warts and all, you've downloaded the VO Radio Show.
Yes, this is episode 1 of the VO Radio Show. My name's Andrew Peters, and over there is...
I'd be Darren Robertson. You can call me Robbo, though.
Okay, Robbo it is. Now, we're putting this show together based on things you might like to hear about the voiceover industry. But we're not just focusing straight onto the voiceover industry. We're taking other people in from other areas of audio, and that was really crap. I don't know what I'm talking about now. I'm waffling.
I think what you're trying to say, Andrew, is there's a little bit of cross-pollination. Is that right?
Cross-pollination is the word I was looking for, or two words.
I like big words.
So we're talking to, in this first series, we're talking to some recording engineers. Richard Lush, for old-timers, maybe remember he was the engineer for the Beatles.
Yeah, looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Also, another audio engineer who worked with everyone from the Pogues, Kirsty MacColl, to Annie Lennox, Ricky Lee Jones, in fact, pretty well a whole bunch of cross-section of people. His name is Chris Dickey. He was Steve Lillywhite's engineer. He's also going to tell us a bit of the goss from behind the window.
Looking forward to goss. Like goss.
And we do love goss. Plus, we've got Joan Bogdan, who's a New York-based voiceover talent and coach. She'll be having a chat with us as well. And we have, in today's episode, in fact, we have a couple of creatives from advertising. And they'll be giving us their perspective on what it's like in the advertising industry. One is Mike Beach, ex-Detroit. Mike, I won't give his age away, but let's just say he's almost twice the age of our other guest. We'll be talking with him, Iain Lanivich, who is from Detroit. Their perspective on the advertising industry you may find very interesting indeed.
One question we must remember to ask is how many beers can you drink and how many sandwiches can you eat in one recording session?
Depends if you're paying for it. That was always something I used to say about recording studios. A lot of them get more work than the other one because they have better coffee and better food.
That's sometimes the way.
Yep.
Sometimes the way. Indeed,
it's always funny because you go to a recording studio to do a track, and I guarantee their busiest time of the day is somewhere between 12:30 and 2:30.
Yeah.
Free lunch.
When everyone's coming for lunch.
Yeah,
free lunch. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked for a few of those in my time, don't worry. And that's the good thing about being an engineer, though, is free lunch.
Yeah, but the worst thing about being the talent is you look through the window at everybody eating their free lunch.
That's right, and you can't eat because, I'm sorry, mate, we make too much mouth noise in that.
Yep. And we're not going to pay you. We're not going to pay you and give you food. You got the choice.
Exactly.
Do you want to eat or do you want to get paid?
Indeed.
So now talking about advertising, I've sort of been thinking about a few things about how advertising has changed. And I know we're going to touch on a few of these subjects with Iain and Mike later in the show.
Yeah.
But a couple of things that I thought were really interesting. And one was that the blame for the demise in advertising, if there is a demise in advertising, is the advent of TiVo, replay TV, and even you go back even further to the video recorder where you can actually skip ads. What do you think?
I totally agree with you. I think, and I also think that a lot of the blame should also probably stand with the stations themselves, both radio and TV, because the ad breaks have become so long now that we've just become numb to them. You know, where a 2 minute or a 2.5 minute ad break, you'd probably go, okay, well, I'll sit through this because by the time I've watched a promo, I'm only being sold for 2.5 minutes. Whereas now, I sat and watched an ad break the other day in The Voice. I think it was like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just craziness. Who's going to sit through that?
Yeah, exactly. Unless they're really good creative, then you might get hooked in.
Yeah, I think creative helps. But if I've already stood up from the television and walked away to make a cup of coffee because I know I've got 5 minutes, no amount of great creative is going to sell me their message, is it? I don't know. I find that quantity is killing us. I think the quality of the work being done out there hasn't changed. I honestly kind of get the feeling that we're just being bombarded with advertising and we've just become numb to it now.
Is that because advertising has got cheaper, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's become more affordable, and there's also so many forms of it now. I mean, you can't sit down and watch YouTube without having to watch at least 10 seconds of an ad first, right?
Yeah.
You know, and there's so many different portals for advertising to be thrown our way. So yeah, look, you know, as an audio engineer, I work on some great campaigns. I'm lucky enough to work, you know, with the top end of town, and also having my own studio work with the low end of town as well. And I think the low end of town has certainly lifted its game, and the high end of town is certainly still pumping out the great stuff they always have. There's some amazing creative minds out there working in the industry, and you come across them too, you know, on the other side of the glass. And you just think you think sometimes to yourself, I wonder if this is all a wasted venture, because is anyone really watching?
Well, that's the problem. The more the pie is not really getting bigger, but the slices are getting smaller.
That's right. And what people actually want to pay is getting smaller as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think because of competition from YouTube and, you know, online stuff.
Yeah, the biggest concern, of course, that everybody is flagging is the race to the bottom. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I saw an interesting quote. This is from a blog I was reading earlier today, and it was from the head of a big digital agency who said, we don't do story, we facilitate the handshake by moving the cash register closer to the consumer. That's much more economical and efficient than trying to create demand and desire.
Nice. Someone's been thinking, writing a few notes over dinner.
I think what he meant to say was...
together.
Yeah, I think what he meant to say was, we'll just go for retail instead of branding.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, there's a lot of people out there who still stand by brand, but at the end of the day, you know, people move on price, don't they, these days?
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Well, there's the other thing as well, of course, is social media. So you've got things like, you know, Facebook, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. Now, all they really do is create traffic.
Yep.
So, you know, you've got all this space to advertise. So my question is Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different social media outlets going to be the new platform for advertising?
Well, you know, that seems to be the way that the consumers are moving, doesn't it? Certainly, you know, we're engaging ourselves in social media more and more.
Well, if you think about it, you don't watch TV on a train, but you probably be watching something on your iPhone or iPad.
Yep. Well, I think more importantly than that, I know people who don't watch TV when they're away on holidays, but they take their iPad or their iPhone and they sit there on social media for an hour by the pool. Yeah. So, you know, I think that's even more telling.
Yeah.
So,
well, if you think about, you know, like how much time you actually spend watching TV in an evening, and then you look at how much time you spend looking at your iPhone or your tablet during the day or your computer. I think the television's probably taking a smaller slice of your media pie.
I think so. I think unless the channels hit something that actually, you know, really engages people. But as I said before, I still think we've become a bit cynical about advertising. You know, I still think that's the time that we turn the volume down and we pick up our iPhone and we go to Facebook while the ads are on, or we get up and go and make a cup of tea, or you know, whatever. So I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not showing revenue-wise that it's moving that way, but you've got to think that sooner or later it will be.
Well, we'll find out more from the guys who are the experts in the show shortly with our guests today, Mike Beach and Iain Lanivich.
In a world where only the best voice will do. Realtimecasting.com.
But now you've been doing a bit of techie stuff as well. What have you discovered?
Oh, look, I was having a bit of a play around with my voice channel a couple of weeks ago, and I've just discovered a bit of a trick that worked for me, and I thought I might pass it on for our techie friends out there, our engineers friends out there. What I did was in my voice bus, because I bus all my voice channels into one bus and then EQ and compress there. Rather than setting up an EQ where I cut frequencies and boost frequencies, I actually set up an EQ first, and all I did was cut. So the roll off at 50 hertz down, which everybody does, I'm sure, was done there. And then with the voice I was working with, I think I was cutting around 250 hertz and a little more up the top. He was a bit SE, so some of the higher frequencies I was cutting there. And then I compressed reasonably heavily. And then I put another EQ in And all I did in that EQ was boost. So the frequencies that I wanted to boost, I touched in that EQ, and then just a little more compression after that. Now, it sounds a long way around, but the thing I found, and I'm interested in feedback from any of our listeners who are engineers or voiceover artists out there who are doing their own engineering, give it a go and let me know what you think. I found that I had to use less EQ, so the end result was something that sounded less processed. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if anyone else out there gets the same results.
That's really interesting, because I saw something a bit similar that a guy was talking about recording records and doing a mix. And not quite the same, but he was saying that when he does a mix, he doesn't mix in stereo, he mixes in mono. And then we'll reference back to stereo to see how it's sounding. But everything he does in the mix, it's always done in mono. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that he mixes in mono. I check in mono. I certainly do. I certainly check my mix in mono before I send it out. And then I have lots of reference speakers here in the Voodoo Studios that I use. I got a mate who's the audio engineer at one of the big agencies in town, and he only mixes in mono, and he only mixes through little computer speakers. He does have some big Genelecs in the room, but when he's actually doing his mixing, he mixes on the little computer speakers and uses his big speakers as his reference. So that's interesting too.
Yeah, well, there's one studio that I work in, and they do. The one engineer who owns the place, he only works using his old Oratones.
Yeah, right.
Everything through the Oratone. That's how he records, and that's how he mixes.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think we were talking a minute ago about the digital age. You've got to think when you're mixing these days that a lot of your stuff, even if you are mixing for TV, they're going to turn it around and put it onto YouTube and all these other places. So somewhere along the way, it is going to end up in the digital environment. And, the old check is still as valid as it was back in the days of AM radio. You check it in mono and check it on crappy speakers and make sure that it kicks just as much as it does on the big ones.
Well, in future interviews coming up in the next few weeks, there's a couple of good stories. One from Chris Dickey about Oratones, how they used Oratones when they were recording the Thompson Twins, which is kind of unique.
Yeah. Well, the Thompson Twins were kind of unique amongst themselves, weren't they?
Yeah, well, when you hear this, you kind of go, so that's how they got that drum sound.
Right, okay.
And our friend from the Beatles, Richard Lush, he's got plenty to say about the way things are recorded these days.
I'm sure.
Yes, he was in the days where it was like straight down the tape, play live.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
What do you mean you can't sing? Well, you can't make a record, get out.
Yeah, overdubbing a 4-track, that'd be fun.
Yeah, well, there's some good stories in there. But anyway, they're coming up in weeks to come. But today's interview is with, as I mentioned before, Mike Beach and Iain Lanivich.
We should get into it.
Let's see what they have to say about advertising.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. Radio, TV, sound design. Find it all at voodoo-sound.com.
This week's guests, we have two, a double header, and they both come from similar backgrounds, in fact, similar part of the world, and have a little bit in common with an advertising agency, which we'll touch on soon. But one who left Detroit back in the 70s and has now become a neighbour of mine is Mike Beach, who's a creative writer for advertising agencies and freelance. And on the line from Detroit is a man who's ex-Campbell Ewald. He's been an advocate of the campaign for Detroit, the rebirth of Detroit, which is how we discovered him in the first place. His name is Iain Lanivich. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. Now, one question I wanted to ask you both, and I don't know who wants to put their hand up first, but this is probably a big one. It's the three influences, the major influences that have tailored you or your career or whatever. It doesn't have to be a person.
It was actually a guy at Campbell Ewald, a guy by the name of Mike Sari, who happened to be my brother-in-law. I wasn't working at Campbell Ewald. I just left the United States Army, and I was talking to him about going into advertising, and he gave me some encouragement along those lines. But during the course of the conversation, he gave me 3 words. He said, "Professionals have reasons." And that has been sort of a guiding mantra for me, and it's also, I think, been a curse in that when an account executive or a client has come to me with an opinion about something, I'll ask them why. And it's amazing how few times I get a cogent answer. Sometimes it just pisses people off.
I like it.
So that's influence number one.
That's
so
number
I'll
one.
stop.
Okay. What's one for you, Ian?
Well, I remember when I was, I think it was maybe about 7 or 8 years old, I went on a family trip, and my parents were split up when I was about 3 years old. So I typically, when I traveled, I went with like my aunts and uncles and my cousins and stuff. And we went to Hollywood and went to Universal Studios. And I remember E.T. had just come out at the time. So there was kind of an exhibit where you could ride the E.T. bike. So I, immediately wanted to ride the bike. And then the next day we went to a game show, a live taping of a game show. And they asked audience members if anybody had a joke that they wanted to tell on stage for a contest. And here I am, 8 years old, and I'm like, yeah. So I went on stage, I told the joke, I made the audience laugh. And that trip was kind of influential, whereas it let me know that I wanted to be on some sort of a stage at some point in time. And, that ended up leading to me playing in various bands. So I was more of a front man. One of my favorite things is really just, new business pitches and having that floor and, trying to sell ideas. And I get the same butterflies when I walk into a big presentation as I do when I, walk on the stage for a gig or things like that.
Okay, what's your number two, Mike?
Well, whether it's number one or number two, when I was 8 years old, living in Japan, my dad was in the U.S. Air Force. There was no TV, so we sat around and watched the radio and listened to shows like the Lone Ranger and The Shadow and Inner Sanctum and Gangbusters and comedy shows and things like that. Anyway, I was just loving the imagination of it and losing myself in it when I was 8 years old.
Ian, have you got another story for us?
Yeah, I do. I grew up middle class, blue collar parents. My dad was a factory worker, a skilled tradesman, they call it. Most of my friends' parents worked, either for, what we call the big three. They were either Chrysler employees or they were Ford employees or General Motors employees, primarily working in the plants. And I used to just pick up on little things. They would talk about things known as a pension, which is basically after you've served your 30 years on the job, you are rewarded with a certain pay for the rest of your life. And I never really seen, my dad or my uncles or, my friends' parents or, really passionate about what it was that they were working on. It was more or less they were passionate about what they were owed at the end of their career. I had an opportunity to be an electrician for Chrysler. And I went in and took the apprenticeship testing and, I passed the tests and I got a letter in the mail that said, you've passed the test. You're going to be an electrician apprentice and you'll be assigned. You'll receive a call in the next couple of weeks assigning you with your job placement. And my family was so excited. Everybody I knew was so excited for me. Like, you're actually going to amount to something. You're going to be doing something. And your next 30 years are paved. Now all you have to do is get married and have kids. And I got that call from Chrysler. And I kind of panicked on the phone. And I lied to them. I told them that I was taking summer classes and I wasn't going to be able to take the job yet until school was over. And I remember the call like it happened yesterday. The lady on the other end said, if you refuse this job now, there will not be another call when your college is over. And, there's people that would kill for this opportunity. And I just said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I need to, go to my classes. And I hung up the phone with them and basically didn't really know how to react. I don't think I told anybody in my family for about 2 or 3 years until after I had, landed another full-time position and my career was starting to get underway. But I remember just sitting there saying, wow, I just turned down Chrysler and I turned down this 30-year path and now I'm kind of on my own and I have to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't know if it was really a kick in the butt, but it made things really clear for me that, I was kind of on my own now.
If I can butt in, there's some parallels. When I left the Army, post-Vietnam, I had no idea what the hell I was going to do. And some people said, well, maybe you should get into advertising. But I was getting knocked back after, interview by interview because basically I'd never had a job before. And in the meantime, I was looking around at other jobs, and I got offered a job. This was exciting, selling workers' compensation insurance. And I was given that job, and the day before, I was actually scheduled to go to Chicago to start training and working in that, a job which would have killed me. I went into Compton Advertising. Showed them some stuff that I'd done, and they said, "What do you know about car advertising anyway?" And I said, "I don't know anything more about cars, but I could probably take a Jeep apart and put it back together again, because that's what I did in the Army. I ran a motor pool in Vietnam, and that's what they do when you've got a master's degree in English. They put you in charge of the motor pool." They said, "Look behind you," and there was this big Jeep logo. And they said, "That's the only account we service out of this agency." Next day, I was working for them. You could put that as my third total coincidence, as my other influence, major influence.
Yeah, but there was also, you've told me the story before, and there was also the line about being a short order chef.
Oh, yeah, yes. My next interview was with the guy from New York, and he saw in my resume, such as it was, that I had short order cook at the Big Boy restaurant in Petoskey, Michigan. And he said, "You're the only guy I've ever talked to that's crazy enough to put short order cook on his resume. But that proves you can do a lot of stuff at the same time without panicking, and that's what you got to do in advertising." So,
yeah. Just to play off that, I've never been into cars. I'm probably one of the few Detroiters that never really has been into cars. And when I started at Campbell Ewald in 2000, I would say Chevrolet was made up probably about 70% of the revenue.
It always did.
Right. And over the years, it started to balance a little bit more 50-50. But you either worked on Chevy or you didn't work on Chevy. This is kind of the way that the agency was structured. I had been there for 8 years before I actually worked on Chevrolet. And I liked working on non-Chevy. I had a variety of different accounts. The United States Navy. I worked on Carhartt clothing. I worked on OnStar, which is automotive related, but it's not directly vehicles. And when I finally went on to Chevrolet, our CEO basically said, "Okay, your time is done. You're going to have to work on our largest account if I'm going to continue to throw you in leadership positions." And I remember being freaked out because I seen a lot of people be very excited when they got their opportunity to work on that account. But then when it was all over, I seen their heads down and they weren't very happy anymore. And it almost felt like it became the career crusher. So I was afraid to work on automotive, for many years. And I remember sitting in my CEO's office and telling him, I don't really want to work on this account. And he's like, "Well, you don't really have a choice. I'm going to put you on this account." So automotive has always been something like I grew up with it. I understand it. I understand it from a marketing and advertising space really well, but I lack the passion for the actual vehicle. But I drive a Jeep and I love Jeeps.
Yeah, I'm a little like you in that regard in terms of doing advertising for cars. I think it's one of the few products that actually sort of defines a person, especially if you're a guy.
It's almost like the modern equivalent, like right now, is you're either an Android person or you're an iOS person.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of defines you. It defines the types of apps you use. It defines, there's typically a reason why you chose one over the other. My third is a kind of interesting one, I would say, is the police.
The police.
Okay.
Shortly after I turned down the Chrysler job, I had sold a joint to an undercover at a rock concert, and I remember the police officer gave me a piece of paper with a phone number on it. He wanted me to call him within the next 5 days and start to give him leads as to where you can get stuff. I walked out of there, I scalped a ticket, changed, put on a hat, threw on a different T-shirt, and went into the concert. Over the next 5 days, I remember sitting there saying, if that was a real police officer, they would have gave me more than a phone number and a piece of paper. So I did nothing about it. And about 6 months later, I had got pulled over for speeding. And they told me that there was a warrant out for my arrest. I was like, whoa, really? And I got locked up. And I wasn't a minor. I wasn't under 18, but I was under 21 at the time. So, I had to go through some probation. And then the offense was, for the most part, cleared off my record. But when that happened, it was a huge wake-up call. My job at the time was I was working in a small factory. I was basically doing exactly what I didn't want to do. I didn't really know what my next steps were. And I was in the car and I heard on the radio a computer job fair that was happening at a nearby city. So I told work I had I was going to be in late that day, and I put my suit on and I got a resume put together, and I went to the computer job fair and I spoke to every single company that was there, and there was over 50 companies. About a week later, I got a call back from a technology company known as CompuWare, who was willing to take a risk on a guy who hadn't graduated college but seemed to know a thing or two about computers. And I got an entry-level position placed in that Ford Motor Company. And that actually ended up being my foot in the door to what ended up becoming my career. I started at Ford Motor doing some web things, early internet stuff. And CompuWare at the time wanted to actually put me through their boot camp course to become a developer. But since I didn't have my degree yet, CompuWare wasn't able to actually put me through the course. A friend of mine started working at Campbell Ewald in advertising. There was a job opening for a digital producer, producing websites and things like that at the time, CD-ROMs. And I went in, I interviewed, I got the job. And 14 years later, I was still working there. So saying no to Chrysler when they called, getting arrested shortly after, it really just kind of, set my path in motion. And I knew that I needed to start making decisions. And I had to basically trust my skills. To this day, one of my best skills is problem solving, which is in a lot of cases all advertising is, just trying to figure out what the problem is and how to actually go about solving it and how it's going to reach the largest audience.
When you look back, what was the one major thing in advertising?
Well, when I got into it, I came in on the digital side. And at that point in time, digital was very, it was like the, I don't know if you use this term in Australia, but the black sheep of the family. Yeah. People knew they needed it, but they didn't know what to do with it. And it wasn't very difficult to get a job. If you knew Photoshop, you were hired. Or if you knew HTML, you were hired. Yeah. And there was really no conceptual side to digital back then. It was purely production. A client needed a website. You did a website. You didn't create concepts for your website. You didn't think about different approaches. You just kind of did it. And there wasn't a lot of involvement from the, brand creative directors at the time. They just, didn't really pay attention to what was going on. So when I look back at the work that I did in the first 5 years of my career, most of it was probably pure crap. But luckily for me, there was some shiny objects in there that paved my way for my career. Right when I landed the job, my client was OnStar. And the spokesperson for OnStar at the time was Batman. And it was basically, what's the coolest car in the world? It's the Batmobile. Well, what can make the Batmobile even cooler? Adding OnStar. So I got thrown into more of a conceptual side, coming up with ideas with DC Comics, starting to do some early TV to web integration, doing, interactive comic books and putting them online, things like that, kiosks at events that, integrated with Batman and our overall campaigns. So from that point in time, while most of my peers were just worried about executing, I was more worried about trying to do more fun stuff. And I would typically always have a side project. So you would do the things the clients were asking you to do, but you would try to figure out something they weren't asking for, put together some concepts, put together a prototype, or, assemble a team that was right for, that idea. And that became, the way I just worked was, just basically trying to come up with something on the side and then bring it to the client's attention when it made sense or when it was ready, and then sell it. And when I look at most of the things that I, share on my portfolio today, or, most of the assignments I'm most proud of, I can't think of a single one that was actually asked for.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. But see, the digital platform was what you grew up in, but Mike, your platform was completely different.
Well, the big thing everybody wanted to do was TV. I mean, that was it. You normally didn't get much of a chance to touch it if you were a junior starting out. Did a lot of print stuff, did an awful lot of collateral before I did national print ads, and was allowed to do radio and work with musicians and stuff like that.
Where do you see advertising going?
I don't think it really changes much. I see too many people thinking the execution is the idea. And, like the idea is doing a website. The idea is doing an app. The idea is doing some cool, augmented reality thing or whatever, is the shiny, one of the shiny objects of the time. Or right now, experiential marketing is huge, because there's so many more things you could do now, with like connecting with phones and tablets and things like that. But I think it's just, it still comes back to a very simple thing, which is just storytelling. And you have to come up with the idea for the story that makes sense, and then just figure out what are the right ways to play it out. So how do you tell a story through a 15-second radio ad on Pandora? You don't. You tease the story, right? And you try to get somebody, into the story, or you just get very blatant and you just tell them what you're selling. So I basically see advertising in two camps right now. There's the in market and the out of market, which hasn't really changed. Back in the day, you'd say there was retail work and then there was brand work, and it's still the same. There's just a ton more retail options now with mobile advertising. That's the funniest thing when I sit in a meeting and they'll come in and say, okay, for this assignment, the client really wants digital. We need some big digital thinking. Well, 9 times out of 10, what they're asking for is banner ads. It's like, well, the budget, the media buy is really just banner ads. Odds are they don't have any budget set aside to go create content or create an app or create some engaging experience or a website. It's just banner ads. And it's very difficult to tell a story, through a banner ad. But that's the hard thing when you think about like integrated marketing and stuff like that. It's where do you draw the line? Where are you okay with, forcing something into the ad, and where are you okay with not forcing something into the ad? Like I don't know how many times I've been in arguments about, do we have to force the tagline into this, tiny execution or mobile ad? And it's like, no, it's not that argument. The sale. Right. Like maybe back in the day, you could be an expert in TV, or you can be an expert in writing 60s or 30s, or you can be an expert in, print, or, but now there's way too many options for you to be an expert. So ultimately, you either have to be an expert at a certain execution format or variety of execution types, or you have to be an expert on the conceptual side where you leave it to other people or you trust other partners to figure out the best way to bring it to life.
Can I say, though, that one thing should be a constant in that you should be an expert in knowing what the hell your customer cares about and wants.
Oh, yeah.
And I think too many people forget that because they go straight to the we need to do digital option, or we need to do X medium over Y medium, rather than let's talk about the bloody customer and what they use and what they want and what they care about.
Right.
You really can't connect the word you use with people that are buying stuff or ideas unless you have a damn good idea about who you're talking to.
Right. It's also interesting with new media. It's just another platform. It's like a radio ad or a TV ad.
I agree with you 100% that basically video is video and, audio is audio, and where it presents itself, that's kind of where it gets complicated, and it shouldn't be.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that I've noticed a lot, of course, and a lot of people have, is when you look at YouTube videos and you get an ad that comes in before, and they give you the option to skip, which usually is about 5 or 6 seconds before you can skip the ad. 9 times out of 10, the ad hasn't even indicated what it is within 6 seconds. So, to me, if you're going to put that ad on in that environment, surely you would think about how you can get some kind of hook in that first 6 seconds to make people either hang there or at least get a message.
Yeah, you'd be surprised by how few people think that way. Over the years, I've presented a lot of concepts that were like the 5-second ad, like not necessarily literally a 5-second ad, but, within those first 5 seconds, trying to make sure that you kind of got a message across so that there's at least a takeaway before they skip, or try to basically raise a ton of excitement in those first 5 seconds that you at least want to watch it a few seconds longer. Most clients and most creative teams just don't think that way, and they don't look at the medium, and try to figure out the right execution style for that medium. They basically write for TV and then expect it to just work across, everything else.
No change there, really.
No. Obviously, everything's escalating in the technology area. What new platforms do you envisage in the next 5 years, for instance?
It's really hard to predict. I'm excited with where drones are going. But I don't know what it's like in Australia. But I know we have a lot of federal regulations prohibiting production companies to utilize drones. But I like where they're going, not just for filming, but like Amazon dropping off products at your doorstep, by a drone. Things like that are just are really just interesting and cool. And how do you then turn that into a message? So when people are seeing that drone in the sky, is there a way to kind of run ads through that? Or when it drops off on your doorstep, is that a new medium? Is that a piece of collateral it drops off to as an ad? I like the Meerkat and the Periscope. I've been watching that. I don't think it's really there yet, but just the live video streaming, there's something to it, and being able to just go live at any point in time. I could see that changing, the way that journalism is done. Breaking news just is visual now as opposed to just text, and you don't have to wait till the camera crew arrives. Somebody can go live instantly, once they see the story present itself. So it's just organizing all of that into a easy way for you to, know it's happening or know it's out there or, that it's relevant to you. That's the difficult part.
The stuff about drones and getting to be live everywhere right now, right there, it also scares me a lot. Because you're not only bringing a message, but you're seeing too much. It seems to me you're being seen, which spooks me a lot. Yeah, I'll just let that out there.
Very scary. Now, a question that's probably closer to our audience is about the voice. Is it still as important as it was, or is it becoming less important?
I don't think it becomes less important at all. I think the same opportunities that have always been there for it are still there. I think it's still, is a huge controller for creating a tone of voice, and a feeling and an emotion. I think it just feels like there's so many other things now that are like almost automated. Like ads, programmatic ads, things like that it just gets flooded, and it feels like there's all these new things coming out and there's just not a place for, the voice, which is true. If you're talking about, static mobile ads or static, web ads, things like that, there really isn't a place for the voice, but the voice is still there. Any video, you're creating more video now than you've ever created. So there's more opportunities for that voice to be, heard.
Yeah, it seems to me that the most effective way to sell something is still one person to one person. When I hear a voiceover, I imagine what that person looks like and what sort of person that man or woman is or kid. To me, it's one of the things that can really impart personality to a product. And I reckon that's still huge in selling and convincing and persuading.
If there's one thing in your career that you miss, what would it be? Mike?
There's a lot of things that I look back at in my life and say, God, I wish I'd done that differently. But they don't relate to advertising. They might relate to women. So I'll let that go. I'll think about that one for a while.
Have you got any thoughts on that one, Ian?
Yeah, I got kind of two angles on it. There's something that I feel like I missed an opportunity, and then there's something that I actually miss, about my career. As far as missing an opportunity, I lack the ability to shut off. It doesn't matter if I'm in the office, if I'm at home, if I'm working out, or wherever I'm at. My brain just keeps moving, and if there's an idea, or if there's a thought for whatever, I don't really shut off, and looking back, there's a lot of opportunities where I was too busy thinking about something that really didn't matter, that I wish I could have just shut that off so that I could have been more present. And there's a lot of, like, my wife says it to me all the time, like, you're there, but you're not really there. It's like you could tell like your brain is somewhere else, but we're all here, and so that would be something I feel like I've missed that opportunity because that time just goes by and you can't really get it back. All I could do is continue to try to work on that going forward. And then as far as what I miss, I miss being one of the guys. I felt like there was there's a car starting next to me.
That's your wife leaving you, I think, with the kids.
No, hopefully not. I remember when I was an associate creative director, I felt like I had, we had about a team of, 7 and then eventually a team of 12 that I really felt like we were a team. Everybody had each other's backs. I remember we had a rule in the team that you wouldn't walk into the meeting without the rest of the team with you. So we carried ourselves as a group. We carried ourselves as a team. We stood behind each other's concepts and each other's decisions, and we backed each other up in, whatever situation, And there was a point where I remember, I started to get into senior leadership, and I just realized that I wasn't part of all the conversations anymore. I was part of some of the conversations, but people weren't as truthful with me, anymore as they would be with their peers and their other coworkers and colleagues. I miss that. I miss having that team. And, being in a larger agency like Campbell Ewald, it's too easy to get caught up into the politics, whereas I kind of wish, at times that I was just part of, like a 20-person small shop and we could just kind of run like a family.
I hear you on that one. I've been freelancing now for, 20 years. So occasionally I'll get into an agency and spend more than 6 months or maybe a couple of years with these people, or be part of an in-house team with a direct client. And after a couple of months, I find myself bonding and being part of that team. And then when it's time to leave, I feel like I'm losing friends. I'm losing people I care about and causes that I care about, and it hits me emotionally. In terms of my career, being part of a bunch of people that are trying to move something from point A to point B and actually care about it, yeah, I miss that, because when you're freelancing, you do a job, put it over, and you lose it. You say goodbye to it, and it says goodbye to you.
That is probably the future of all of our industries, is that we will become more and more solitary because of technology allowing us to work remotely. So the whole thing is changing, and I just don't know whether it's a healthy thing.
It's a lonely thing. Can be, yeah. And that's not healthy. And it's probably, even though in sort of time motion studies, it would be thought of as efficient. I reckon a lot of your aha moments come from just talking with people and hearing things by accident, which trigger certain other things. And you don't get that from sitting in your office gazing out at your backyard.
No. Well, that was a bit of a down note to end with.
Oh, sorry. No, I think it's...
let's all go get drunk.
But I'd take issue with the fact that you have to become more solitary. I think there may be just a different form of family and team that hopefully could be enabled by technology.
I have 3 kids. I have a 14-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So they've all, for the most part, grown up through technology and social networks and being connected. And there's a couple things with my 14-year-old that I realized over the last few years that were interesting. One was she had her first boyfriend about 1.5 years ago, and they would study together, but not physically. I'd walk up to her room to go talk to her, and she would have her iPad sitting on her bed, and she would be working on her homework. And if you looked at her iPad, she was FaceTiming with her boyfriend, who was sitting on his bed with his homework, right? So they weren't actually there, but they were kind of there. And then the other thing was, I remember being in elementary school, and I had to go to another school. And I remember when you went to a different school, you basically lost your friends. That was, for the most part, kind of the end of your friendship. Or if somebody moved, that was the end of it. That's not how it is anymore. I see... my daughter is still like best friends with a person from kindergarten, from first grade. She had a friend of hers last year move to another part of the country, and they still connect, through video chat and, FaceTime, on a daily basis. So they've realized that they don't have to be part of the same school or at the same place or part of the same company or things like that to maintain that relationship. So I think for us, because we didn't grow up that way, it's almost weird. It's different. It's strange. It takes some getting used to. But for the kids that are kind of growing up with that as just the way it is, they have the ability to stay connected with anybody, anywhere, at any time, and build really strong, meaningful relationships.
Yeah. I've actually reconnected after, decades of not even thinking about people. with old high school friends and old college friends. And I know I'll get an email or something on Facebook today from somebody that I haven't physically seen for maybe 30 or 40 years.
Maybe that's the upside of technology. Well, that was a lovely chat. Thank you, Iain Lanivich.
Where's the coffee? Where's the coffee? You promised me coffee.
Yeah, sorry about that. The cafe's closed at the moment. Yeah. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
You've downloaded the VO Radio Show.
Well, there you go. That's our first interview on the first VO Radio Show. Our special guests this week were Mike Beach and Iain Lanivich.
We've broken our cherry.
We have indeed. It was good. I find that quite insightful, finding out how the people on the other side of the glass think and how they perceive the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought the stuff about drones in the interview was very interesting, so let's see how that plays out.
Absolutely. That's right. Who knows?
Something completely different. But talk about different, we're going to go on to the other side of the glass next week and talk with one of the 5 guys in a limo. They were the 5 trailer guys, and one of them was Nick Tate. And Nick's story is really interesting.
Yeah, and you know, it's got to be a good bloke because he's an Aussie, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. But no one knows that when he's reading a trailer.
No, it would actually be. I would actually be interested to see how many people actually realised Nick was an Aussie.
Well, as you'll find out in the interview, I think one of his clients was so annoyed when he turned up with an Australian accent, she fired him.
Oh, really?
But yeah,
goodness me.
We'll hear all about that next week on the VO Radio Show.
That's
when we're
right.
back with Nick Tate.
Absolutely. See you then.
Be good.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. To polish your next audio production, check us out at voodoo-sound.com. Find professional voices simply all in one place. Realtimecasting.com, including me.
And don't forget to catch next week's show because we've got this.
1/5 of the 5 guys in a limo, Nick Tate.